Paul Duffy.
Hey, Carl. Long time. How are you, buddy?
Nice to see you in beautiful Vancouver. It's a little overcast right now, but it looks like we're going to have another nice day here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to let everybody know that FTMIG has a Discord server. We haven't been very active on it or active at all in years. So I cleaned it up and I started a specific AIML channel.
Perfect.
Where potential new investors or legacy shareholders, what have you, can go in there and discuss things.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
So if you go in the description below, you will be able to join that server. And on that note, Paul.
Well, that's actually useful because I can pop in and out of there periodically, or we can do a couple of events, live chats, stuff like that.
Good. Yeah, we can do they have a voice channel. We can do like a Discord live.
Yeah.
And my job is to take your questions to Mr. Duffy, so we can do that.
Good idea.
But it's been a while.
It's
been a while. Happy New Year's, Merry Christmas, and Happy Hanukkah, whatever. But
all the above.
I'm going to throw it off to you. I'm just going to say, Paul, you take this wherever you want and start wherever you want.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you, everybody. Great to be back on the show there, Carl. And as you can see, we're doing the morning drive in the lovely town of Vancouver. I think we left it off last, probably about 8 months ago, and I would think it has been, probably the best way to describe it is a blistering 8 months. If shareholders recall, I would do these, sort of first 100, then next 90, next 90, next 90 type updates. And when I got into the back end of the last one, which would have probably been around Q2 of last year, I declared that we were looking to build a platform with which we could scale the business around, a deep technology that would allow us to not just do sort of one or two particular point solutions, but give us the ability to really scale. Also to add some services components and obviously some rich licensing. And so I'm kind of happy to report that, once we had completed the asset purchase from Naiad Labs, we formulated the NeuralCloud. People can see it online. It's the neuralcloud.com. And we began taking this sort of early version of a long ECG neural net out into our network. And part of the reason we're in Vancouver is we have some phenomenal relationships with some of the world's best and foremost cardiologists. And not just practicing cardiologists, but guys that are deeply involved in the diagnostics around cardiology. And so we showed them this technology. We said, look, this is emerging, we're building it, we want to know, where the use, the fit would be. And it became very, very evident that it had great utility across the entire spectrum of, quote, cardiovascular disease. And I'll explain that in a minute in a little more detail. But really what that ended up doing was indicating to me that we had found what I was hoping for AIML, and that was that deep technology that had a broad suite of uses and applications, but could be delivered in the context of a platform. So it's scalable. Once it lights, there's no friction on scale. Users can go from 1 to millions without having anything else but compute power behind them. So, that was really the impetus for me as we went through most of, I would say, Q3, early Q4 of last year. And so as we went along that journey, what we ended up developing is a product that we're calling Max Yield. It allows us to get the maximum amount of yield out of a diagnostic signature around an ECG. So really, what does that mean? For folks that have gone through any form of concern around their heart, anything related to cardiovascular, oftentimes, and I would say probably every time, you go for what's called a Holter report. You essentially have a Holter monitor placed on your chest. You spend anywhere from a day to 2 days, sometimes 2 weeks. And the Holter report's gathering information. It's compiling basically a snapshot of your heart, and it's delivering an ECG to essentially a diagnostic lab. We then took those ECG files, and again, this is completely device agnostic, so it's independent of whatever the device is, be it a consumer wearable or a regulated Holter monitor. And we're able to ingest that signal. And if you can believe it, we can take the full signal and literally create the equivalent of an Excel spreadsheet for every single heartbeat. Just think of your spreadsheet table as every row is a heartbeat, and you may have 200,000 heartbeats, and we literally label those from your onset and offset of your P, your QRS, and your T wave. And then we take another spreadsheet and we create all the intervals that go along with that. And in short, really what we're doing is we're taking in a signal, we're integrating it through our NeuralCloud, and we're returning this vast data wall of a spreadsheet that now has enormous utility across the entire spectrum of cardiovascular. And so really, what do I mean by that? If you're an ECG support technician in a clinic, this data wall can provide you with all the support you would need to rapidly produce your Holter monitor report. There's a number of these that get done literally every day. There's an enormous backlog, and this technology enables us now to 2, 3, 4x the throughput, the capacity, and the capability of that particular type of diagnostic. The same technology can be delivered into a non-regulated market where professional athletes, clinical research organizations, academic institutions, the hundreds of millions of ECGs that are performed pretty much throughout Canada and the US on an annualized basis for the purposes of, frankly, just tests, clinical trials. And so as we started to sort of penetrate that market, we realized, you know what, we've got to get a few blocks in place first. So we hired one of the best IP patent houses out of New York City around all life sciences and biotechnology, Wolf Greenfield. So they're actively working with us currently on our patent strategies, both for patent protection, but as also as IP strategies as we begin to scale the technology. I'm actually up in Vancouver this week meeting with one of the foremost regulatory specialists. She's going to be taking the lead for us as a business. Andrea and her team were pivotal in getting the COVID vaccine essentially through FDA in the early days, if everybody remembers that wonderful period. But she is now engaged in working with us at AIML to build the same level of regulatory pathway for this technology that I just described. And then at the same time, we've brought a fairly substantive group together on the technology side, because not only do we have the data scientists and the capability with our neural nets, but we've the ability now to put a front end into all of this technology that makes it abundantly available to clinics, to clinicians, to academic institutions, to those sports performance teams that I talked about. Pretty much anybody that is looking to really get a deep probative insight into their cardiovascular condition. And so, yeah, it's been a pretty busy 8 months, I would say. In addition to all of that, for those that have been following, we raised a few $1 million to help us, kind of load up on some capital. But at the same time, we did two what I think are very transformative moves through December as we closed out the holidays. The first is we acquired a company called Quantum Sciences. This is for those that are in the sort of health and health tech space, certainly here on the West Coast. Mark Orsman helmed that company, and Mark has come into the organization and works alongside myself as the executive chair of the company. So that's gone very well. I'll share a little bit more detail on that as we continue to go forward here. Concurrent to that, we also brought in Peter Kendall. Peter came in as our president and chief commercialization officer. Peter is a rock star. Basically came in early November, started working with him, got things locked down, and then announced January 1st formally that he would come in to the C-suite and help me and Mark kind of steer and scale the business. Peter's background is telehealth, MDS, Life Labs, etc. Lots of experience in commercializing and scaling, but more importantly, given his tenure, he's a world-class executive. Somebody who's building teams, scaling teams, basically putting the infrastructure and the process in place while we're running around laying all these planks. So that's been a phenomenal, move, if you would, for the organization.
This all fits in with your history too, no?
Yeah, very much. I mean, it's just been, like I said, a pretty blistering 8 months. And we're just now coming to the point where I feel confident on two fronts. One, we are moving very quickly to getting orders and revenue on the platform and on the technology. That part I'm thrilled to talk about as we go through basically 2025. But more importantly, I feel that we've moved quite substantively into the realm of IP protection, that we can begin to disclose and discuss what we're working on without putting ourselves in a little bit of jeopardy. Because this is very interesting, very new, very novel technology. For our shareholders, just in those that I've spoken to kind of one-on-one, what's interesting is we sort of pressure tested the product market fit of all of this September. just to get a gauge on what the appetite would be for this type of signal technology, basically. And I got to tell you, Carl, it was completely overwhelming. We
Can you give me a quick, give everybody a little bit of an example of what that was like in that energy?
No, I mean, so as most people know, I build and scale businesses, right? So process and methodology, I refer to it as blitz scaling, where you just go really hard with outbound, phone calling, multi-touch campaigns, a geofence for search engine marketing, a little bit of SEO, but basically I'm grabbing leads. And at the end of the day, we would probably pull down 50, 75 leads over 2 or 3 weeks by this sort of intense outreach around our value proposition. And we would literally be into about 40 or 50 discussions about how our signal algorithm would literally take the signal off a consumer or a regulated wearable, run it through our algorithm, and then return back a clean, a crisp, a very, basically the signal to noise ratio would effectively be removed. You would get the true signal and signature out of the wearable, which, anybody that studies wearables, probably the little unknown is that there's a lot of noise in the signal between the sensor and say your phone by the time you get it. So, we fit nicely within that particular part of the road. And, virtually every company that we reached out to identified this as one of their top engineering challenges. And so when we saw that, we thought, time to, really go deep on protection.
Yeah, we got something here.
Yeah, it was good. And that's on the other end, when we start talking to the clinicians and the cardiologists, they're telling us, well, if you can get the signal off the device, here's what we're able to do, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so we realized very, I would say pretty abruptly, this is the sweet spot for us. Let's focus the tech in the domain, in the lane of cardiovascular. And so, you'll see over the next several weeks a number of announcements around what we're doing to shore up the position in the realm of cardiovascular. Yeah.
So how big is that market?
So most people are almost immune to this statistic now, but upwards to 50% of the people on the planet have some form of development or developing cardiovascular issues or disease. It's that prevalent. And what we're looking to do is insert this technology into as many devices, into as many applications, and as many use cases as we can to provide a number of things. First, early indication would be huge. That's a challenge and a worthwhile hill to try to take. But that one it's no small feat. If you're able to crack the code on that, you've made a significant dent in helping humanity. Another area we find that this technology will be fundamental is in folks that have had a stroke, a heart attack, or some form of known issue around.
Where they're high risk.
Exactly. And so this helps with the monitoring, with being proactive, part of a rehab program, maybe a metabolic or cardiac rehab program. There's all forms of uses. When you pair it back, what's super phenomenal is this is an industry. The Holter industry, for instance, and the reporting has been around for about 60 years. There are over 100 million medical Holters done annually in the United States. There's probably, call it 10 million in Canada. It has not been disrupted in 30 years. The last element of technology to come into that space that had any meaningful impact was moving it onto Windows so people could digitize it. Because the strip itself is a very manual process. And then being able to label that strip in a consistent way has never actually occurred. So we've got this really unique turn of the wheel where we realized this would be a complete force multiplier in the context of this industry. And so, the signal algorithm can be applied to virtually any signal along the acoustic or the electromagnetic spectrum, but we chose to go after cardiovascular waveforms in its first use case because of the depth and penetration we can get quickly in the market. So we're excited by that.
Well, let's talk about this Mark Orsman fella.
Oh,
Because I don't know, him and Well Health seem to have a pretty interesting connection.
Well, I think best way so two things. Yes, that's absolutely true. But Mark is a seasoned technology executive. One part investment banker, one part business strategist, one part, M&A guy. But deep connectivity in healthcare, huge network across, pretty much every facet of that space, and was formative in the early days of the, sort of, I would say, launch and then scale of Well Health. So he can, I'm sure, give you his background when you speak with him. But what I found with Mark is that he and I were very simpatico around how we build and scale businesses. And when we got involved in this, it became very clear that Mark's group, his network, and his experience in the Vancouver area would be quite fundamental to the early days of where we would go with this technology. And that's what I've been doing. I've been coming back and forth here since May, probably every second week, called roughly twice a month. We now have an actual office for AIML, 1033, I think it is, Davie Street. It's basically in the cardio clinic, if you would, of St. Paul's Hospital, which is part of the Providence Health Network there. So we've literally implanted ourselves there specifically because we see that as a significant market opportunity, but more importantly, we're in the middle of it all.
Yeah, you want to work with
cardio
the
stuff's
professionals.
going on. Yeah, exactly. And so Mark, of course, was instrumental in all of that. And then as we lay out the next, I'll call it sort of 4 quarters, 2 years of growth and scale within AIML, it'll be basically myself, Mark, and Peter sort of steering the carriage around how that goes. So it's a really strong, triumvirate, if you would, of executives, which is good because, before that it was me.
Yeah. And everybody, I've done my due diligence on both of these individuals, and they both have a background in sales.
Oh, we're the technology is built, the products that go on top of the tech are being built, but we are selling today. Like, we're literally moving forward and selling and taking purchase orders as we go through this quarter.
Is there anything else you think you want to communicate to shareholders or potential shareholders?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for your support and your patience. Thank you to all of those that came in on our latest financing. I think we have got great days ahead of us. Like most technologies, you want to be somewhat selective in how you expose and bring it into market. A lot of fast followers, in this space. But I can tell you that, the cardiovascular segment, if I just call that our lane, is deep and it's as nourishing as we wanted from a technology point of view. In other words, the broad uses and applications of this technology that we think today we're experiencing, I believe, are just the tip of the iceberg. I think we're going to come to learn the utility and use of this capability, basically taking an ECG and converting it to an Excel spreadsheet, and then taking that wall of data and allowing others to use, prosecute, or, essentially, if you're a known professional, certified in any manner, and you understand ECGs, this is like, hey, I'm giving you the Excel spreadsheet, do with it what you want. Kind of like, here's the numbers for the financial report, have at it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And if anybody looks into the world of ECGs, trying to do that today, very difficult. Just labeling a 30-second ECG strip could be an 8-hour experience for somebody. What I also find somewhat interesting is, this is a technology stack. This is a layer in a technology stack that is going to continue to evolve. I think I shared with a lot of our shareholders, during our, next 90-day kind of discussions, if anybody goes back to them, you'll see I do a little bit of a deep dive in the smart sensor markets, in the wearable markets, the segments that we're going after. And I can tell you that, the smart sensor and the wearable market, which are co-joined, are growing at a almost 20 plus CAGR, pretty much for the next 5 to 7 years. These things are exploding.
Yeah.
And the reason for it is the sensors themselves, while they call them smart, they technically are. I mean, they can connect and talk and do a lot of really interesting things, but all of them have one common issue: signal quality. There's always a signal to noise ratio that comes out of everything. And so what I wanted to do was find a technology that would embed itself natively into that information stream and allow us to do that. Take the signal, clean it up, make it crisp, return it back, and then produce it basically into a format that anybody can work with.
Yeah.
That's the data tables.
Well, I'm going to speak openly here. I kind of, before I had a little bit of a difficult time understanding some of the technology.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But this I actually understand very simple.
Yeah.
It's just cleaning up the noise.
That's all it is.
It really, to simplify, it's taking the signal that has a lot of noise, cleaning it up and giving a lot more accurate data.
But once you clean it up, there's a bunch of things you can do. you can accurately label it. And if you can label it, you can store it into a table. And if you got a table, hand it to somebody who knows what to do with the data, they can turn it into information.
So what will someone pay for that?
Well, we are pressure testing that right now. That's a very good question. I do not want to disclose our final pricing, but we are having a bunch of fun on that. And I'll tell you why. There's a couple of models. There's the pay-as-you-go. So I'm a researcher. I'm doing a bunch of preclinical. I've got 25 ECGs. I need to do them every week just to, basically tabulate. So that's a pay-as-you-go, bang, 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 every day. And I can tell you that there are hundreds of thousands of those happening literally every month, just across Canada, probably millions across the US. It's bonkers. Just think every university, every college, every hospital, anybody doing research, let alone the big pharma, the CROs that are out there. I mean, this is just prevalent, right? Beautifully untapped market for us. So, think $100 a turn to $1,000 a turn, and you're just going. I mean, the numbers can really scale. The second way we look at it is licensing. Okay, so I am a device. I love the signal algorithm. How do I get it? And so we've already made it available in an SDK for embedding either natively into the wearable or onto the app. We've got a CDK which allows others to utilize the same, or the device guys to use it within the context of their web assets or their portals. And so of course that API can also be used. So there's no friction to us to get this out. So we're currently speaking with parties about licensing as well.
Right.
And so what would that mean and how we would do it? Then we've got other areas where we're thinking of bundling and making available in HealthKit and Samsung, right? Where basically it's Android, Google Fit, but it's ultimately Samsung, into their health ecosystems so that everybody can access it. And that would also be a licensing or a pay-as-you-go.
That would be huge.
It'd be very big.
That'd be massive.
Yeah, very big. So, all of these are on the table to be explored. And, like most things, pricing, oftentimes can be a bit of a random walk around value. But in the early days, it's like, let's get some traction. Let's get some, let's just get some users and let's run with it. Ultimately for me, whether it's through an acquisition or a licensing format, ideally I would like to see our signal algorithm as a default setting in these operating systems. Because that's where I feel we will get the highest yield. The greatest amount of economic rent will be the up and down through that signal to us. And so if, there is a quote acquisition into a party like an Apple or a Samsung, what we miss in that situation is the internal operating systems of the Medtronics, the Philips, the GEs, and the others who are doing massive amounts in the regulatory world, right?
Yeah.
And they too have a deep desire to, remedy their signal issue. So I'm thinking at the moment, licensing into multiple parties is the first route that we would pursue. But again, it evolves in real time. As you get into the market and you talk to people, feedback that you get, et cetera, really helps drive where you go. So it's very much a dynamic situation, but it's still early days, so yeah.
Now, do you think that, like, you're into sales a little bit from what it
Sure,
sounds
of
like? Look, the burn on the company is, it's a technology company.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think you're going to have money for the next few months, or is this going to bring in significant revenues where you don't have to worry about that?
Well, they'll probably always be, we just call them continual financings for sure as you scale.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the apex of burn that we're going through now relates primarily to three key contributions. There's the regulatory pathway is not an inexpensive venture. The patenting that we're doing, is not inexpensive, though I wouldn't think of it as being, overly burdening. And then, of course, the product development we're doing, for the most part, is, a bit of a lift. But once we've got, the product to a certain level, you're maintaining and you're doing point releases. So these are temporary bulges, I would say, from a burn point of view. But to your point, once you start selling this, it is, extremely high margin, right? Like, I mean, literally our compute on this is pennies that we're selling for tens of dollars. That's
right.
The ratio. So yeah, you scale to a couple $100,000 a month of revenue, and you're just, you're in the 80+% margin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's all it is. And so that's kind of the approach that we've taken. And that's my plan through 2025, is to just drive that revenue up, get some great deals, and the more this gets used, the more the network effect takes over, the more people want to use it. I would love to see the prosumer, consumer, the quantified self, biohacker type community adopt this as well, because they're a great advocate for these types of technologies back into the healthcare system, and without putting too much of a kind of spin on it. There are some phenomenal benefits to, I'll just call it the Canadian health system, with respect to saving costs, to, clearing out capacity issues, getting patients, reports and diagnostics quicker, etc. And all that's still to come, but that's on the radar, if you would, for 2025.
Anything, what do you think about the stock? Do you think, you're going to be hitting the road a little bit, talking to investors?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned at the top, it's of course our first time out in a bit, but the fact is, I'm feeling confident enough now that we've got the right boundary around the intellectual property, definitely the right team, and I feel with our regulatory positioning and where we're headed, and obviously our product development cycles, I'm now at a point where I can bring fairly meaningful and regular updates to our shareholders that I think will help propel and grow the excitement around the stock, because this is going to be a fun story. There's no question. Yeah.
Thank you, Carl.
Lovely homes around here.
I look forward to the content, and I know Ashley is very excited to speak with you again more frequently.
Great.
And go in the description. We'll put the Discord, AIML Discord link. Paul's a pretty tech savvy guy, obviously, so he'll be able to figure out how to do a Discord live. And we're going to see if we can find Mark. Let's go find Mark.
Let's go find Mark.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Follow the Money Investor Group is a 100% Indigenous-owned company and certified with the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business.